Hello, and welcome to English Lab. I'm Jenny, and today we're going to dive deep into C2 level English listening practice. Now, if you've reached the C2 level, you're already at the top of your game when it comes to English. But here's the thing, just because you're at C2 doesn't mean the work stops. Far from it. The journey to mastering English continues, and one of the most important things you'll keep working on is your listening. In this lesson, we'll break down how to think like a native speaker and really understand English in its natural flow. First off, let me tell you what to expect from this lesson. At the C2 level, you're expected to understand advanced vocabulary, complex sentence structures, and even the subtle nuances of native speech. This is the level where you're no longer translating from your native language to English in your head. Instead, you're thinking directly in English. If you've ever wanted to sound more natural when you speak, listening plays a huge role in making that happen. But I want to be clear, C2 listening isn't just about hearing the words. It's about comprehending the message that's being communicated. It's about being able to follow fast-paced conversations even when people use expressions, slang, or regional accents. When you listen like a native speaker, you start to feel the rhythm of the language. It becomes less about learning words and more about understanding how English works in real life. What does this mean for you? If you're wondering, what's the big difference between C1 and C2 listening? Here it is. C1 is about understanding well-structured, formal language, but C2 challenges you to handle informal speech, idiomatic expressions, cultural references, and regional variations. The goal is to listen to real-world conversations. Whether it's watching a documentary, listening to a podcast, or chatting with a native speaker, and pick up on everything happening from the tone of voice to the underlying message. Improving fluency. One of the best ways to improve your fluency is to immerse yourself in the language. Listen to real-life conversations. This could be anything from movies and TV shows to news broadcasts, or even everyday interactions you hear around you. But here's the secret. The more you listen to natural, unscripted speech, the quicker your brain will get used to the rhythm of English. When you're listening to these conversations, don't just focus on the words. Pay attention to the emotion, the intonation, and the cadence. This will make you more comfortable in understanding the subtleties of English speech. And it's these subtleties, the ways we use words in different situations, that can take your speaking skills from good to great. Thinking in English. At C2 level, you shouldn't be thinking in your native language and then translating back into English. That's a step that should have been left behind long ago. Now, you should be thinking directly in English. The more you listen, the easier it becomes to process information instantly without that translation step. And the more you hear native speakers use natural phrases, expressions, and colloquialisms, the more you'll absorb that same style and rhythm into your own speech. So, how can you improve this? The key is to listen as much as possible. But don't just listen passively. Here's a quick tip for you. Active listening is when you focus on understanding everything that's happening, not just the words, but also the tone, pauses, and body language that come with speech. Try to predict what someone might say next based on what you're hearing. You'll start to notice patterns, and that's how you learn to think like a native speaker. The importance of real-world listening. One thing I can't stress enough is the importance of listening to real-world conversations. Textbooks and formal lessons have their place, but real-world listening is where the magic happens. This is where you start picking up slang, informal expressions, and native-level idioms that are often missing from more structured lessons. But here's the thing, it's not just about the language. Listening to these conversations also helps you understand cultural nuances. When you understand culture, you can better interpret the context behind the words. And context is everything when it comes to language. By now, you're probably eager to dive into some practice. So, here's what I'd like you to do. Find a conversation or video in English. It can be a movie, a podcast, or even just a YouTube video. Focus on listening to how the person speaks, how they phrase things, and how they use expressions that feel natural. Pay attention to the tone of their voice, the pauses they make, and even the emotional undertones in their words. That's the first step in thinking like a native speaker, training your ear to the natural flow of the language. As we continue through this series, you'll see how to break down these conversations and take your listening skills to the next level. But for now, remember that listening is about more than just understanding words. It's about understanding meaning in the context of real-life communication. We're going to take a deeper dive into how everyday situations play a huge role in mastering C2 level English listening. This isn't just about knowing words and grammar. It's about understanding how native speakers use English in real life, casual conversations. Let's start by talking about something important: real-life English. The English you hear in movies, news reports, or even textbooks is often quite formal. But real conversations are much more informal, with a lot of slang, idioms, and even regional expressions thrown in. It's this kind of natural, everyday speech that you need to be familiar with to really sound like a native speaker. Common expressions and phrases. At the C2 level, you'll find that native speakers tend to use a lot of expressions and phrases that don't always make sense when translated directly into another language. These expressions are key to understanding how English is actually spoken. For example, let's look at the phrase "to break the ice." If you translate it directly into another language, it might sound completely confusing. But in English, it means to start a conversation or to make people feel more comfortable in a new or awkward situation. Understanding these idioms and being able to recognize them when you hear them is a major part of being fluent in English. The role of culture in language. But here's the thing, it's not just the words that matter. Understanding cultural context is just as important. Let's take another phrase. It's raining cats and dogs. If you're unfamiliar with English culture, you might imagine literal cats and dogs falling from the sky. But really, it just means that it's raining heavily. Why do you need to know these cultural nuances? Because language is shaped by the culture in which it's spoken. Different regions, different social groups, and even different age groups within a language community can use words and phrases in unique ways. At the C2 level, you're expected to understand these differences and be able to interpret the meaning of conversations based on the context. For example, if you're watching a British TV show, you might hear phrases like "I'm knackered," which means tired, or "I'm feeling peckish," which means hungry. These aren't the kinds of expressions you'd typically find in a formal textbook, but they're commonly used in casual British conversation. And at C2 level, you should be able to understand and even use these expressions with ease. Understanding slang and idioms. Slang and idioms are an essential part of everyday speech. At C2 level, you should be comfortable recognizing and using them. Here's an example. If a native English speaker says, "That movie was a real tearjerker," they're not talking about something that actually causes tears. They're referring to a movie that is emotionally moving or sad. What makes slang tricky at times is that it changes quickly. What was popular a few years ago might not be used much today. That's why it's important to stay updated on how native speakers use language. The best way to do that is by listening to a variety of media, everything from social media and conversations to movies, podcasts, and even stand-up comedy. These are all gold mines for discovering new slang. Practice activity. Identifying slang. Let's do a little practice. I'm going to play a short conversation, and I want you to listen for any slang or informal phrases the speakers use. After the conversation, we'll break it down together. Listen to the sample conversation. Imagine a casual conversation where two people are talking about their day, using slang and informal expressions. Now, let's break it down. Did you catch any expressions like chilling, gonna, or it's a piece of cake? These are all common slang phrases that you'll hear often in everyday speech. At the C2 level, you need to be able to spot these phrases and understand their meaning without having to stop and think about it. Adapting to regional accents. Another key part of C2 level listening is being able to understand regional accents. English is spoken in many different countries, and within each country, the accents can vary greatly. Take British English and American English, for example. Even though they're both English, the way people speak in London can be very different from the way people speak in New York City. At C2 level, you're expected to understand a variety of accents and regional variations. Whether it's the fast-paced slang in New York, the laid-back tone in California, or the distinct British accents from different parts of the UK, you need to be able to follow along without missing a beat. This can be challenging at first, but the more you listen to various English-speaking regions, the more familiar you'll become with their accent-specific vocabulary and pronunciation. So, where can you find these accents in action? Try listening to interviews with people from different English-speaking regions, or watch TV shows and movies set in different places. Even YouTube videos can provide you with a wide range of accents. The more you practice, the easier it will be to understand these regional nuances. We're going to focus on advanced vocabulary and complex grammar in real-world conversations. At C2 level, you're not just understanding basic English anymore. Now, it's time to incorporate sophisticated vocabulary, nuanced expressions, and advanced grammatical structures into your speech and comprehension. These elements are what truly make your English sound native level. Using advanced vocabulary. At the C2 level, your vocabulary should be wide-ranging, including formal and informal terms, along with technical words and specialized jargon. But the real challenge is not just knowing these words, it's knowing how and when to use them. For example, let's take the word contemplate. It's a more advanced way of saying think about, but it's used in a more reflective or serious context. Here's a sentence with contemplate. I'm contemplating whether I should take the job offer in London or stay here. While a C1 speaker might say, I'm thinking about the job offer, a C2 speaker is likely to use a word like contemplate to sound more thoughtful and precise. Another example, instead of saying very good, you could say exceptional or outstanding to add more sophistication to your vocabulary. But remember, it's important to avoid overusing advanced vocabulary. If every word in your conversation is advanced, it can make you sound unnatural. It's about balance, knowing when to use simple words and when to bring out the advanced terms to make your speech richer and more varied. Mastering complex sentences. One of the key characteristics of C2 Level English is your ability to use complex sentence structures. While a beginner might say, "I don't like the movie," a C2 speaker might say, "Despite the overwhelmingly positive reviews, I found the movie to be surprisingly underwhelming." In this sentence, there's a combination of complex ideas using subordinating clauses and conjunctions like despite. These types of compound and complex sentences are essential for fluent, high-level communication. They allow you to express yourself with greater depth and clarity. Breaking down complex sentences. Let's break down a more complex sentence to see how it works. Not only did she arrive late, but she also forgot to bring the documents we needed for the meeting. Here's what's happening in this sentence. Not only, but also is a correlative conjunction used to connect two contrasting parts of the sentence. Did she arrive late is an inversion for emphasis, which makes the sentence sound more formal and complex. She forgot to bring the documents is the second part of the sentence, adding another layer of detail. When you use this kind of structure in a conversation, you're able to express multiple ideas within a single sentence, making your language flow more naturally and sounding much more advanced. Practice activity. Complex sentences. Now let's practice. I'm going to give you a simple sentence, and I want you to turn it into a more complex version. Here's the original sentence. I didn't enjoy the meeting. How can you make this more advanced? Try turning it into a sentence that uses a conjunction or a subordinate clause. Pause for user practice. Here's a more advanced version. Although the meeting was well organized, I found it to be rather unengaging and ultimately a waste of time. By adding although and expanding the sentence with additional detail, you're using more advanced grammar to express your thoughts. Common errors to avoid. As you begin using advanced vocabulary and grammar, it's important to be aware of some common mistakes that advanced learners make. Here are a few. 1. Overcomplicating sentences. Sometimes, in an attempt to sound more advanced, learners create sentences that are too long or too complex. This can make your speech sound forced or even unclear. The key is to make sure that your complex sentences still flow naturally and are easy to follow. 2. Incorrect word choice. Be cautious about using advanced vocabulary incorrectly. For example, you might want to say, "I was quite surprised," but if you choose a more advanced word like flabbergasted, it may not fit the tone of the conversation. Always ask yourself, is this word appropriate for the context? 3. Misusing phrasal verbs. Advanced learners sometimes forget that phrasal verbs, e.g., pick up, look after, are a huge part of everyday English. Don't neglect them when you're aiming for fluency. You want to sound natural, and using phrasal verbs is key to that. Practice activity. Word choice. Let's do another quick practice. I'm going to give you a sentence with a simple word, and I want you to think of a more advanced or sophisticated alternative. Here's the sentence. The movie was good. Can you think of a more advanced way to say this? For example, instead of good, you might use impressive or captivating, depending on the context. We're going to tackle a big challenge that many learners face at the C2 level, understanding native speakers. When you reach this level, you're not just looking to understand textbook English. You're striving to understand real conversations, where the speech is fast, informal, and full of intonation, slang, and colloquial phrases. At C2 level, you need to be able to follow along with native speakers in a variety of contexts, from casual conversations with friends to academic lectures and even business meetings. But here's the thing, Native speakers speak quickly, often using contractions, dropping syllables, and blending words together. For example, instead of saying, I am going to, you might hear I'm gonna. Speech speed. One of the biggest hurdles in understanding native speakers is the speed at which they talk. Native speakers often talk fast, and they don't always enunciate clearly, especially in casual conversations. So how do you keep up? The key is to listen to real-world content. Watch movies, listen to podcasts, or tune into interviews where people speak naturally and at a normal pace. Start by listening to these recordings several times. The first time, you might catch only half of what's being said. The second time, a little more. Eventually, your brain will get used to processing fast speech, and you'll find yourself understanding more and more each time. Tip: don't worry if you don't catch everything the first time around. Focus on understanding the main idea. As you continue listening, you'll start picking up on smaller details. Tone and intonation. Another critical element when listening to native speakers is tone. Native speakers use tone to convey emotion, intention, and meaning. For example, the same sentence can sound very different depending on how it's said. I can't believe you did that. O said with a flat tone might sound like mild surprise. O said with an angry tone, it expresses frustration. O said with a happy tone, it conveys excitement or disbelief. Understanding tone is essential, especially when it comes to sarcasm or irony. At the C2 level, you should be able to recognize these subtleties in speech. When someone says, yeah, sure, I'll totally help you with that, the tone will tell you whether they're being sincere or sarcastic. If you don't catch the tone, you might misunderstand their actual meaning. Practice activity, tone recognition. Let's do a quick practice. I'll say a sentence in 3 different tones, and I want you to guess what each tone means. Ready? That's really great. O first tone, excited tone. This sounds positive, like someone is truly happy. Second tone, flat tone. This could indicate indifference or lack of enthusiasm. O third tone, sarcastic tone. This might be used when someone is disappointed but says the opposite. This is a great way to build your listening sensitivity to tone. By doing this, you'll develop the ability to read between the lines and understand unspoken meanings in conversations. Focus on context. Context is key to understanding native speech. Words in isolation don't always convey their true meaning, but in context, they make sense. For example, if someone says, I can't even, you might be confused at first. But if you hear it in context, like in a conversation where someone is overwhelmed or shocked, it means I can't handle this or I'm speechless. Pro tip: when you're listening to conversations, try to guess the meaning of unfamiliar words based on the context. It's okay if you don't understand every single word. Focus on the bigger picture, the general meaning behind the conversation. With practice, this will become second nature. Mimicking native speech. One of the best ways to improve your listening is to mimic native speakers. This doesn't mean copying every word verbatim. It means paying attention to how they pronounce words, how they pause between sentences, and how they emphasize certain words. Let's do a little exercise. I'll say a sentence, and I want you to repeat it as closely as possible. Listen for the rhythm, the intonation, and the stress. Ready? Sentence: I can't believe how quickly time flies when we're having fun. Now, when you repeat this, make sure to Put emphasis on quickly to reflect the surprise. Use a slightly rising tone on time flies to show excitement. Don't forget to drop the G sound in having, common in spoken English. Repeat this several times until you start getting comfortable with how it sounds. This will help you speak more naturally and also improve your listening comprehension. Practice activity. Mimic a native speaker. Find a short video or audio clip of a native English speaker, maybe a TED Talk, YouTube video, or even a podcast. Choose a segment that's about 30 seconds long and try to mimic the speaker's pronunciation, rhythm, and intonation. Listen to how they emphasize certain words and how they sound when they're expressing emotions. Then, play the clip again and repeat what you hear. Over time, this practice will help you not only improve your listening skills, but also speak more fluently by incorporating those natural rhythms and expressions. We've covered some essential skills, like listening to native speakers and recognizing tone. Let's shift gears a little and focus on advanced listening strategies. At C2 level, listening isn't just about passive comprehension. It's about actively engaging with the material, learning how to deconstruct complex information, and developing strategies to improve over time. In this section, we'll dive into some techniques that will help you understand even the most challenging spoken English. You'll learn how to tackle long, dense speeches, how to process complex information, and how to break down rapid conversations without missing crucial details. Breaking down complex information. Let's face it, not all listening material is easy to follow, especially at C2 level. You might find yourself listening to a long lecture, a debate, or even a business meeting where the speaker is going through a lot of data or making several points at once. At first, it might feel overwhelming. Here's the trick. Instead of trying to catch every single word, focus on breaking the information down into bite-sized chunks. When you're listening to a complex piece of information, 1. Identify the main points. What is the speaker's overall message? What are the key ideas or themes being discussed? 2. Listen for transitions. Pay attention to words or phrases that signal a shift in thought, like on the other hand, in contrast, or to summarize. These signals tell you the direction of the conversation and help you organize your thoughts. 3. Don't worry about details initially. Focus on the big picture first. If you understand the context and main ideas, the finer details will make more sense as you go along. Listening to TED Talks and lectures. A great way to practice complex listening is by listening to TED Talks or academic lectures. These often present in-depth ideas, and the speakers tend to use clear, formal English, which makes them ideal for learning. When you're listening to these, try to summarize what the speaker is saying after each paragraph or key point. This will help you retain the information better. Clarify your understanding of what the speaker is conveying. Pick up on patterns that will help you with future listening exercises. Key listening strategies. Now, let's look at some strategies that will help you improve your listening at C2 level. 1. Pre-listening preparation. Before you start listening, think about the context of the audio or video. Who is speaking? What's the topic? What do you already know about the subject? This pre-listening step helps you predict what might be said and prepare your mind for what you're about to hear. 2. Active listening. Active listening means you're not just hearing the words, but you're also engaging with them. As you listen, try to ask questions in your head. What's the speaker's main point? Why are they saying this? How does this relate to what I already know? By actively engaging with the material, you'll retain it better and understand the underlying message more clearly. 3. Use technology to your advantage. There are so many resources out there for improving listening skills. Podcasts, audiobooks, and YouTube videos are great, but you can also use tools that allow you to slow down or loop sections of audio, which helps you focus on difficult parts. You can even use subtitles if available to connect the spoken word with the written form, especially when you're first starting out. 4. Practice shadowing. Shadowing is an advanced technique where you repeat what the speaker says in real time. This is especially useful for improving both your listening and speaking skills at the same time. Try to mimic the speaker's tone, rhythm, and pronunciation. This will help you process spoken language faster and improve your ability to speak more naturally. Practice activity. TED Talk summary. For this activity, I want you to listen to a short TED Talk or an academic lecture. As you listen, try to take notes on the main points and key ideas. Afterward, summarize the talk in a few sentences. This will help you practice breaking down complex information and retaining it. Don't worry if you don't catch every word. Focus on getting the big picture first, and then go back to check any details you missed. The goal is to be able to identify the most important information and understand the core message of the speaker. Improving comprehension over time. Improving your listening skills doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, but the more you practice, the more natural it will become.
Here are a few tips to keep in mind.
1. Set realistic goals. Set small, achievable goals for your listening practice. For example, aim to listen to 15 minutes of English every day. Over time, increase the length and complexity of the content you're listening to. 2. Track your progress. As you practice, pay attention to how much you're improving. Is it easier to follow along with fast conversations? Are you catching more details in lectures? Reflect on your progress and adjust your practice based on what's working and what isn't. 3. Be consistent. Consistency is key. Make listening a regular part of your routine. Even if you only have 5 to 10 minutes each day, use that time to listen actively to something in English. Whether it's a podcast, an audiobook, or a short conversation, consistency will help you get better faster. 4. Challenge yourself. As you get more comfortable with listening, don't shy away from challenging material. Watch movies without subtitles, listen to podcasts with varying accents, or even try to understand live news broadcasts where the speakers are often speaking quickly and using complex vocabulary. We're going to talk about how to apply everything you've learned about advanced listening in real-world situations. As you move to C2 level, understanding real-world English in everyday life, work, or academic settings becomes even more crucial. You're not just learning English for exams anymore. You're preparing yourself to use it in complex, real-life scenarios. At C2, you should be able to understand and participate in a wide range of professional, academic, and social environments. This includes everything from boardroom meetings and academic discussions to casual conversations with native speakers from various cultures. Let's break down how real-world English applies in different settings and how you can continue improving your listening skills for maximum fluency. Using English in professional settings. If you're planning to use English in a professional setting, whether for a job interview, a conference, or day-to-day workplace communication, C2 level listening is crucial. At this stage, you need to understand technical vocabulary, formal presentations, and even jargon specific to your field. For example, if you're in a business meeting, you'll need to follow discussions that may include terms and phrases specific to finance, marketing, or management. Even if you don't understand every single technical term right away, your ability to understand the context will allow you to engage more fully in the conversation. Let's say you're in a job interview for a sales manager position. You'll be asked questions about your experience, strategies, and performance. You'll need to listen carefully not just for the content of the question, but also for underlying meanings that might not be directly stated. For example, when asked, "How do you handle tight deadlines?" the interviewer is likely looking for clues about your time management skills and ability to perform under pressure. Adapting to different accents. Now, let's talk about accents. One of the challenges at C2 level is understanding English speakers from different regions of the world. English is a global language, and native speakers come from many different backgrounds, whether it's British, American, Australian, or even Indian English. Each region has its own accent and cultural influences that affect speech patterns. Here's the thing, the more exposure you get to different accents, the easier it becomes to understand them. In the workplace or in social settings, you might encounter a variety of English accents. You'll need to get used to subtle differences in pronunciation, rhythm, and vocabulary. For example, the way Americans pronounce words like schedule, pronounced as schedule, might differ from the British pronunciation of schedule, schedule. In Australian English, you might hear different slang or expressions, such as arvo for afternoon or chockers for something being full. If you're working in an international company or studying abroad, you might also hear mixed accents, which can make understanding even more challenging. That's why listening to podcasts, watching international news channels, or even speaking to people from different backgrounds is important at this level. Practice activity. International accents. Here's a fun exercise. Find a short video or audio clip with an accent you're less familiar with. It could be from a news report, interview, or talk show. Listen to it without subtitles and try to identify the accent. Afterward, see if you can pinpoint any specific pronunciation features that were different from what you're used to hearing. This exercise will help you familiarize yourself with different accents and improve your overall listening flexibility. Understanding culture in language. Another important aspect of real-world English is understanding how culture shapes the way people communicate. Language is not just about words. It's about context, nonverbal cues, and cultural references. For example, if you're listening to a conversation in a British setting, there's a chance you'll encounter humor that relies on irony or dry sarcasm. In American English, you might hear people speaking more directly, with a focus on optimism and individualism. In Australian English, humor might be more relaxed and self-deprecating. By learning about different cultural contexts, you'll be able to interpret the meaning behind body language, tone, and phrasing that might be specific to the culture of the speaker. This is a huge part of listening at C2 level, as it allows you to connect with speakers and understand the full range of meanings being communicated, not just the words. Practice activity. Cultural understanding. To help you develop a deeper cultural understanding of language, try listening to a conversation or a speech from someone in a different country. Afterward, reflect on how the speaker's culture may have influenced the way they communicated. Did you notice any specific cultural references, humor, or expressions that were unique to their country or region? Using English in academic settings. If you're studying or working in an academic environment, you'll need to be able to understand lectures, seminars, and academic discussions. At C2 level, you should be comfortable with high-level academic vocabulary, as well as the ability to understand complex arguments and specialized terminology. For example, if you're listening to a lecture on quantum physics or sociology, the professor might use words or phrases specific to those subjects that you're not familiar with. The key here is to focus on the context and structure of the speech. If you can grasp the main idea and follow the logical progression of the lecture, you'll be able to understand the complex material being presented. Continuing to improve your listening. At C2 level, the journey never really ends. You can always keep improving by exposing yourself to more real-world English. So, what's the best way to continue practicing? Here are some tips. 1. Immerse yourself in English. Surround yourself with as much spoken English as possible. Watch international movies, listen to English podcasts, and interact with native speakers in professional and social settings. 2. Engage in active conversations. The more you engage in conversations, the better you'll get at understanding and responding naturally. Practice active listening, where you focus not just on words, but also on tone, meaning, and cultural nuances. 3. Use technology. Apps like TED, podcasts, or even YouTube are great tools to help you keep improving your listening. Some of these platforms also have transcripts or subtitles, which can be very helpful when you're learning new expressions and vocabulary.